Welcome to the Field Notes podcast, presented by Seaworthy Functional Medicine. Seaworthy exists to help you overcome your complex health challenges so you can be fully vital. Now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Downey.
How can addressing our primal needs give us the things that we want in our health? Today, we are so fortunate to be joined by Dr. Matthew Campbell, who is an expert in this area and a PhD psychologist with 20 years of work. Dr. Campbell, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
So please tell me if we need to add anything to your bio for our audience, who I thank for joining us. So you've got many years of experience in clinical psychology, and you made this observation that people weren't broken or lacking in motivation, they were depleted.
Yes.
And now you've developed this Primal 5 program we're going to be talking about today, where by people addressing these needs we all have based on some really old hardware and software.
Right. Yes.
Good things happen. It's very fitting with certainly the nature of my work. Often people come in excited that they're going to get a different pill or a different exercise regimen. And so they're often surprised when I say you can't supplement your way out of a lifestyle deficit, and you can't lifestyle your way out of a mental, emotional, spiritual hole. You need to be comfortable in your own skin, then pick the lifestyle, then pick the supplements, sort of in that order. And so
I love that.
it'll be great getting to talk to you today about your approach. I'm super excited about it. And we'll start in just a minute with, set the stage, but then we'll segue into most of the most important things are things that if you and I do our jobs, we make them fresh and in the moment and exciting, because that's what they are, even though they're things we all thought we knew. It's just that we don't. And we talked about, like, eat your veggies. So we'll talk about that.
That's right.
But let's start with your origin story, right? If you were in the comics,
right?
How did you get fired up about this? How did you have this aha moment? How did you develop this approach?
Well, it's really over so many years of practice and working with people and going over things. And of course, when someone comes into a psychologist's office, the natural thing that we're looking for when we go into a mental health professional's office, a lot of times we want to tell our story and we want to talk about, stressors or history, and those are all incredibly important. But what I was finding just time and again was that I was having the clients I was having come into the office were just at a very foundational level, not taking care of what they needed to take care of. And they were exhausted, and they were just, as you mentioned, depleted. And so the things that we were trying to work on, while very important, we were really limited. We're really limited when someone is deficient in their sleep, when they're not getting outside, so sedentary, when they're isolated, when they're in that short-term reinforcement loop, and they're just, all of the technology and all these things that can make us feel better in the moment, but there are consequences in long term. And so I was seeing this so often that it just kept echoing again and again. And so that's where this came about, was the idea that our bodies have not changed, but the world we live in has. And so just because the world we live in has changed, our bodies continue to have the same needs. And I think a lot of times we tried to be so smart, and we want the complex solution is more appealing to us. When oftentimes it really doesn't need to be that way. Oftentimes the things that affect us the most are also the things that we know are good for us.
Thank you so much. As we keep learning from you. I'll see many, many people who think they're going to get $100,000 worth of health from a week at Mayo Clinic and $0 worth of health from $0 worth of sunshine. And they get $100,000 out of the sunshine. And Mayo sometimes just illuminates their dis-ease,
Right.
their labels for
Right.
the downstream manifestations of their depletion. So a lot of this is rewriting the narrative about where our health comes from and the ability to write big checks out of our resilience bank account, I think.
Right. It's something that I was listening to a few of your earlier podcasts, and one of the things I thought was interesting, the two that come to mind, the podcasts that I listened to, is people mentioned, well, someone is doing all the right things. And that's fantastic if they are. It's very rare. And so we talk about these things that we know, the things that are in our primal five. These are not novel, revolutionary concepts. But when we look at the numbers, it's actually pretty amazing on the negative side of how we're doing in these regards. There's a white paper on loneliness because it's an epidemic. People, about 60%, I believe, of foods consumed are highly processed. Nearly half of people aren't getting adequate movement in their life for exercise. And then we look at sunlight and sun exposure, and then, of course, what we consume more generally. So these are things that are difficult. But I also think it's important to recognize the context. I think we need to understand it to help ourselves act on it. And we live in a world that makes these things, we have to be so much more intentional. Our ancestors had no choice but to do these things to survive. Mm-hmm. Now we have to be very intentional about doing them and oftentimes do them instead of that fun short-term thing. So it is more of a challenge for us. And that's why the lazy and the motivation part, I kind of push back against.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'll share here that my aha moment around this was there used to be this thing called the exercise prescription, and talk about a snoozer. It was a guarantee that the person's in a rebel, not in the future, in the moment, would make a note, sort of note to self, doctor prescribing, blah, 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 do not adhere.
Right.
So then Institute for Functional Medicine tries to freshen that up with movement. And that's more inviting, admittedly. So I want to give Institute for Functional Medicine credit. But my aha moment, probably from my own life and then translating that to my patients and this audience, is I thought, why do we move? And for me, the two times I could think of I didn't have to tell myself to move was when I was on my bike as a kid with my friends every summer day. The next day, nobody had to give me an exercise prescription to get on my bike again. We were going to go somewhere, do something fun. And same thing swimming in summer in Montana.
Right.
And then I know now there's the social connection, there's the joy, there's the awe, there's the fresh air. So it's ticking 5 boxes, 7, not just the cells getting increased perfusion and the mitochondria getting a little time. And so I turn movement into play. If your movement feels like play, now you're in the zone. And then the thing I've noticed most, because also your and my work includes attunement, we're attuning ourselves to the radio station of each person. So when I talk about movement as play, that's when their eyes light up. That's when they lean forward. That's when they get a little smile on their face. And I can tell they're thinking of something they might actually like to do or that they remember. And I think all of the things in your primal five have that immediacy, that energetic resonance, that importance. And so my invitation to everybody is learn from Dr. Campbell today about these beautiful things and have that sense of excitement that this sort of torpor or spell, that's another problem of contemporary living. We're sort of in this torpor about, oh, how could going out and getting a little sunshine and fresh air help me? We're sort of asleep. Use this as an invitation to wake up into the immediacy of what's available to you.
I love that. And I love when you describe stacking activities. I love that. And oftentimes that social aspect really helps us to stack. We can talk about it in terms of accountability, partners, and so on and so forth. But as you said, at its ideal, it's having fun. It's enjoying yourself. It's creating things because the things that we're discussing here, we know have tremendous long-term benefits. We know that part. But if you can incorporate things together, like the social and the movement and the enjoyable activities and so on and so forth, then you're getting that short-term benefit too. And so I love that. I love that example of play.
Thank you. Well, let's do a tour of the Primal Five.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So our Primal Five, again, is based on what did our ancestors do? What were our bodies made to do? And of course, logically, we have the same bodies. They were made for these things. So if we have deficits in these areas, logically, we're going to suffer. And the research bears that out in each of these areas. The first is sunlight. Our ancestors were outside. There were not climate controlled conditions. There were not, so many of the luxuries that we have now. They were made to be outside. And so getting that sunlight, and obviously we need to be careful with it. Obviously we need to protect ourselves, from excessive UV exposure and things like that. So that's certainly important, but we need that time outside. We need that sunlight. We need the sun on our eyes. We need that, to absorb that. And we know that helps set the circadian rhythm. We know that it has mood benefits and such. We need to sleep. Our bodies were made, we need that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Generally speaking, it is so important for our mood and for memory consolidation. We need it, everything it feels like is affected by sleep and getting that adequate amount of sleep. And as you said, these things can be connected and sometimes inherently are connected, because morning sunlight is one of the best sleep management techniques. Getting that, sleep management begins when we wake up, getting that early exposure to the sunlight. We need to move. As you said, I love what you said, because the original copy of the workbook, I had a friend of mine who's I live in a college town, and she is the head of the exercise science program. And so I asked her to look it over, and she said, we use movement now. Exercise can kind of have intimidating connotations to people. So it's like, point taken. It's movement from now on. And so we changed that to movement, but we're made to move. And we're not made to move, exercise, whatever you call it. It doesn't need to be an extreme exercise regimen. It's just moving. It's getting our bodies in motion. Walking is, I think, the most underappreciated exercise, so to speak, that is out there. It's fantastic for us. And so movement is essential. We know it helps us with mood and anxiety. So often it's such a tremendous stress reliever. We also know that movement, exercise is equivalent to antidepressants. It has such a profound effect in that regard. The social connection part, I think that's missing all too often in some of the programs and approaches to taking care of ourselves. We are social animals. We are meant to be each other, with each other. We don't survive alone. Really, from a health perspective, all health conditions, mortality goes the wrong direction when we're isolated. We are made to be with humans. We are made to have contact and have genuine connection. The way I describe it is that, we have relationships and contact where that time together is the end, right? It is the purpose. It's not a means to an end. It is the purpose. We are there just because we enjoy the presence. It's a meaningful connection with a human. And then there's finally consumption, which in our technological age, that has gotten much larger. We naturally would think of it as food consumption, water. Maybe we would think about it with alcohol, substances, so on and so forth. But we live in such a technological age that we really need to be considering media consumption, social media, news, pornography, all sorts of things that is our fuel. Obviously it's consumption, so it is what fuels us. And so that's what we're running on. And we need to be intentional with that.
Mm. Mm. This is awesome. I just love this. Big part of why I love it so much is because I've seen so many people that I invite to reflect on these sorts of things, try something. The ones who do and get benefit, admittedly not everyone, but most do, because these are we're leveraging these things that are just waiting to be turned on. But they're folks, they're sort of blown away when they come back. Wow.
Right.
I'm feeling better. And I guess some aren't. They sort of knew they needed a way to do it, but they were just glad to find out it was doable. I think another thing that'd be really useful during the interview, if you can do some de-identified storytelling, another thing that intimidates people, kind of like the exercise prescription, is they think, I know Dr. Campbell's right, but I'm coming at this from depletion. So share with us, how does your program address that? Where are the first footholds? Can people pick any of the 5? What do they need to know? Or what do you see in your practice about how this actually works, the process, right?
Right. So in psychology, there's a term we use, behavioral momentum. And so, or behavioral activation. And so what we're looking for one of two things. What is it, or what is the area where you're seeing the biggest deficit? Is your sleep horrible? Are you having a difficult time getting moving? Are you isolated? What of these are you struggling with? It's either that, or what would be a good first step for you? Sometimes it's simply, hey, can you have your coffee in the morning on the porch? Can you walk around the yard with a cup of coffee or a tea or whatever it is? Instead of just letting your dog out into the yard, could you step outside and kind of feel the grass between your toes with your dog? These kind of things. And so it may be that someone says, I really want to work on this specific area. And it also could be, hey, I'd like to just get the ball rolling. But I think the key part is realizing we're only looking for progress. No one is going to be perfect. And if perfection is our goal in any domain of our life, we're bound for failure because we're humans. We're flawed. Life happens. And that we accept that. But we're just looking to improve. And that is, to me, is the key, is looking, we are our measuring stick. And we are just trying to move it forward. That's all we're trying to do. We don't want to do them all at once. And that's why the workbook is set up with 5 different weeks, one for each area. You don't need to go through it in order. By no stretch of the imagination do you need to go through it in order. You can pick whichever you'd like to begin with. And there may be an area where you're great. I have my oldest son is amazing in how he takes care of himself. But it was funny. We were having a conversation. I was talking to him about these different things, and he's like, Dad, I mean, and in his world, he said, everybody's doing those things. Everybody, has got that taken care of. And the irony is, he didn't look up from his phone as he was telling me this. As he's scrolling through whatever social media platform he was on, he was telling me how everybody knows you're not supposed to be on your phone all the time. There's a difference between knowing and doing.
That's great. How old is he?
He's 21. He's
Yeah.
21. Yeah, he is
Yeah.
my clean eating, exercising, guy, loves his sleep. But, for him and his generation, it's tough. They've
Mm,
grown up on that stuff.
mm,
And
mm,
so again, it's something where we really have to be intentional.
mm. Yeah. So not to let's see. What I flashed on while you shared that, and I've talked about this a couple of the times, but I think it's a really useful concept. So not as a religious comment, but as a spiritual comment. There's this thing in Buddhist psychology called the near enemies.
Mm,
And so it's really easy to understand opposites. Love and hate are 180 degrees from each other. All of us know the difference between those, but near enemies are only 10 or 15 degrees apart. So the virtue of equanimity, not being attached or adverse to things, just being
mhm,
present.
right,
Its near enemy is apathy. And so they look the same,
right.
but
Yes,
they're characterologically different. So the
yes.
person says, "Oh, I don't involve myself in the welfare of the community because I have equanimity." Sometimes they're telling themselves that, but what they actually mean is, "I don't care anymore." Uh,
Oh, Rob, that is so interesting you say that because I had a professor in graduate school who I learned so much from, and he was Buddhist and just an amazing human. But when I would read what he would suggest, non-attachment was always the thing that really stretched me the most. That I always struggled with the most.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, so I think now it's this same motif again that it's kind of like that voice in the old Charlie Brown things, wah, 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 when the
Peppermint patty.
voice
Yeah, yeah,
gets
yeah,
up.
yeah.
Or there's Far Side cartoons where it's what the owner of the cat says, right? And you can see the
Uh-huh.
words, and
Right.
then what the cat hears, is just. Um,
Right.
so I think that now the zone is flooded with the concepts that you and I are talking about. But again, the degree to which people are engaged with them in an immediacy that they
Hmm.
would bring to a conversation with a friend or their favorite video game or their painting or their
Hmm.
sport, the degree
Right.
of in the moment engagement with that thing, now the zone is flooded. So they'll say, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing that." And the question is, are you?
Hmm.
What is it that you want that you don't have? And to what degree
Right.
of these things that you think you're actually doing, maybe you're not. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. For me, then, it's moral courage to ask
Hmm.
myself, am I doing what I thought I
Right.
was?
Right. Right.
And I
Yeah.
always try to provide examples. I just made amends the other day, uh, around an issue that I had kind of fallen into blame. And I just thought, oh, it's time to clean up my side of the street. And it wasn't easy, but it was based on curiosity in the moment about, well, I'm really judging myself lately. What's going on there? And I thought, oh, well, I'm really judging some other folks.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
anyway, sorry to go on at length, but yeah, what's your take on some of that stuff?
Oh, I have so many. Let me organize. I think that um, insofar as what you were describing, I think that a lot of times people will think, well, I do that, or I'm doing these things and it doesn't work. Now, mind you, I don't want to suggest or imply in any way that these are the secrets to life, that everything is going to be fantastic if we do these things. What I'm saying is these are things that give us the best chance for
Mm-hmm.
things to be as good as possible. And some of them can, in fact, in and of themselves, for our emotional well-being, can really take us pretty far. But then
Mm-hmm.
there's life. There's things that we deal with, stresses that we deal with, traumas that people have gone through. So I don't want to suggest that this is all there is. But I will say that oftentimes people will think, well, I, you know, I'm playing video games with people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm playing video games, or I walk to the mailbox. I'm
Hmm.
outside, I'm getting that, but that kind of an idea. Or another one I hear a lot, maybe the one I hear the most, I don't need that much sleep.
Hmm.
Um, like I can run on 4 hours or 5 hours. And what I think is that we are so accustomed to depletion. We are so accustomed to it, we don't recognize how things can be. I remember one time I got really inspired in my late 30s. I don't know if you remember that P90X. I guess it's probably still
Hmm.
around, that exercise
Hmm.
program. And
Hmm.
so, I got really excited by it. And I guess I had a masochistic streak in me. And so I did it, but I also really cleaned up my diet.
Hmm.
And one of the things that was the most interesting to me about it was I ate very clean for a pretty sustained period of time. When I introduced processed foods back into my diet, my body told me, you know,
Hmm.
this is not what you were made for. This
Hmm.
is not natural to you. It was almost like the allergic response that we can have, where when we're constantly exposed to the allergen, we feel cruddy,
Hmm.
right? But it's
Hmm.
nothing new. But if
Hmm.
we're not exposed, if we're not around that allergen, the moment we are reintroduced, it's a very strong allergic response. And
Yeah.
that's what it felt like to me, is that my
Yeah.
body was just telling me, oh my gosh, what are you doing? This is
Mm.
not my fuel.
Mm. I'm really I'm really glad you're sharing it this way, in that I don't want our audience to think I'm playing Pollyanna here. And that's maybe where the play example falls apart a little, because it's things people could do over and over again that they don't have to.
Hmm.
But but what I hear you saying here, I would characterize as the way we show up for a friend. So if a friend is struggling over, let's say, 3 months, which is kind of the secret sauce for these things to start to manifest in people's being less irritable, or thinking more clearly, or joints aching less. I usually see about 90 days. And the functional medicine research clinic, when it was in existence, told people to not make any decisions about the value of what they did for 90 days. So if any of us had a friend or a loved one struggling with their boss, or getting their homework done, or waking up on
Hmm.
time, we wouldn't just say one day, uh, "Hey, I'm there for you. How's it going?" We would just
Hmm.
keep showing up over and over again. And I think there's a discipline, maybe not the right word, but there's a sort of follow through, and that has more to do with, there's this feeling of, this seems like the thing to lean into. I want to lean into this, or I'm hearing that inner voice say,
Hmm.
this is important. And
Yeah.
because the way we heal is incremental, uh, we wouldn't expect all the vegetables to come up in our garden, or all the flowers in the spring with a day of
Right.
watering.
Right.
So I do think people, some of those, there's dimensions of that that require some follow through. And then it really stands out when they change the narrative, have the processed food, go back to the food triggers, go back to negative or toxic thinking, whatever it is. There's this
Right.
sort of feeling in the body of, oh man, I was really digging that clean fuel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that you're mentioning something that is such a roadblock for people in making these changes, and I think there's a few parts to it. The word discipline. I find that there's often a reaction I see in folks when we mention discipline. Oftentimes they'll think, well, I'm not good at discipline, you know? And I think that that's a false narrative. I think that all of us have areas of our life where we have discipline, which I would define as doing the thing that's needed, or that is healthy, rather than the short term relief that we're seeking. I think that we're doing that in that regard, and we have things. Most people get up for work, right? Do they feel like getting up for work? Very likely not, but they do it. That's discipline. And so we have it in certain aspects of our life. We can tap into that. But I think that what can be most difficult for us is that we need to be humble. And we need to realize that we're going to be at our best when we set the situation up for ourselves the best. There's a concept that I'm hearing more and more out there called friction. And it is trying to make healthy things have the least friction, be the easiest for us to do, versus the things that are less healthy create the most friction. So in other words, for me, what that looks like is I try to reduce friction with exercise. And the way that I do it is I have some pretty rudimentary exercise equipment in my garage. And so there's not much friction. I just need to take, 20 steps and I can exercise. So it's not about, I don't have time this morning, or such, or, the foods that I don't want to eat. I don't want them in my house. I want to make myself take that extra step. But I also think that sometimes, and this is something that people don't love, I got to limit my choices. If I ask myself what I feel like doing with each decision, it's going to be a tough situation for me. Like if I walk my dogs every morning, if I woke up and, I hit that alarm and I thought to myself, do I feel like getting out of bed right now? Do I feel like getting out of bed right now, getting dressed, putting the collars on, walking around? I would imagine that pretty often I would say no. But instead, I throw my legs down, my feet hit the floor, and I just put one foot in front of the other. I don't have to be excited about it. It's just what I'm going to do. And I think that the more we build that, the easier that is to have that approach.
I'm so glad for people that are getting to hear this from you. I shared with my team here, I had a morning 4 or 5 days ago, sort of a new experience for me. Just didn't feel like getting out of bed, which is part of what you've been invoking. But I stopped and said, why? What am I feeling in my body? What's this dread? And it was that my to-do list was already, free schooling out in front of me, right? And I've heard depression characterized as overfixation on the past and anxiety as overfixation on the future. And I thought, oh, this is anxiety. And so the striking thing to me is my wife's been such a genius in our household, and my daughter too, around gratitude practice. And now me and my wife and my kids have all really picked up that ball. So we have gratitude practices at dinner. If there's interpersonal friction, we express gratitude, 3 things in the moment, just to reset the narrative. And the feeling was, yeah, oh, I get it now. I'm really tired. I'm just super tired this morning.
Yeah.
And I thought, I think it's the gratitude getting me out of the bed. And just that feeling of, wow, I live in a clean, dry house in Alaska, and I get to go look out the window. I get to have a hot beverage. I get to be in the yard with my dogs and look at the sky. And I'm not feeling it, but I'm really grateful for my blessings. And I don't think I do have the energy to do all that stuff I've got to get done. So I'm just going to do this one thing gratefully. And I liked it that it was sort of intuitive. What do I need in the moment? Again, it felt like what I would do for a friend. I think if I were chatting with them and they said, I just don't feel like getting out of bed. Okay, that's interesting. What are you feeling? And not that gratitude is a remedy for everything either, but it comes back to there's a bunch of things that are important that we don't feel like doing. We need a meaningful way to relate to those things if we're going to be successful.
I really love that. I love that idea that gratitude and kind of honoring yourself, it brings me, as I was listening, I was thinking, well, that's taking care of yourself. That is caring for yourself. And that idea of self-care, it's so important. Unfortunately, I think that it's been commercialized. And so I think it's been so commercialized in terms of a spa treatment, a vacation, and things like that. Don't get me wrong, those are wonderful. I'm not trying to suggest otherwise, but I think that people often hear self-care and they think indulgence, as opposed to thinking, I'm just going to take care of the basics. I'm going to take care of what my body needs. I'm going to nurture that. And that is the foundational, fundamental self-care. And that is absolutely essential. And, to me, these things, the gratitude, the noticing, kind of, that's a very Eastern approach. I love that. But that part of it, it's recognizing that in this world where there are many things that affect us over which we have limited control, I am going to connect with the things that are so impactful that I do control. I'm going to focus less on those things outside of my control and more on what I know is really powerful that I can do. And I think so often when we feel that stress and distress, it relates to I'm so focused on things over which I don't have control, how other people behave, how I'm evaluated by others, that has so much outside, as opposed to, what can I do?
Brilliant. This is great. Yeah, I know it's a stretch. Part of me was thinking about the near enemies again. So if we do those 5 things for ourselves, that I would describe as the sort of example of the sort of virtuous trait, and then the spa or the sauna is an adjunct or an amplifier of that sort of resonant, health vibe, for lack of a better term. But if we flip the narrative, if we don't do the 5 things, there's not enough switches turned on. Then the near enemy is that the day in the sauna doesn't actually function as an amplifier because there's not something there to add to, and it's not enough on its own.
Oh my gosh. You say that, and I think of some professionals that I've worked with in the past, and in your field, and these folks that are just neat people. They're helping people. They're in medicine. They're working really long hours, oftentimes. And I just remember, it's been some years, but I was working with some of them, and some physicians, and they would have this idea that they would be working extraordinarily long hours, and when I would make mention of it, and how are you doing with this, and they would say, I mean, it's a lot, but we're going, and they would describe some 2-week vacation that really did sound pretty awesome. But these super high functioning, really neat people had this idea that somehow that vacation was just going to be a good reset for the next 26 weeks, and it's more about kind of our day to day, and what we're doing in our day to day. And hey, fantastic. Go on that safari, go to that beach. That's awesome. I love it. But what's going to impact you, your functioning emotionally and otherwise, is more about daily choices.
That's a powerful place to wrap. That's as good as it gets right there. Yeah. They're cobblers without shoes, but they're going to go have shoes for 2 weeks.
Right. That's right.
Anything you wanted to share that we didn't get to?
I really appreciate our talk, and thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and really enjoyed your perspectives as well. That was really enjoyable for me. The only other thing that I would want to mention, it's actually what you and I discussed just before we started. Our Primal 5, this approach, and we made reference to it earlier, but what is inspiring me to talk about this currently is just the workbook that myself and a guy, Dr. Semko, we developed. And the idea is, we know that people are familiar with these ideas. We're trying to give a framework get movement going, no pun intended, but we're trying to get a direction, going in the right direction in these different areas, and encouraging people, to select one. We're looking for progress and not perfection, but just trying to get information both on how do these things affect us? What are some good behavior change techniques that we know, from the literature, that are useful, and how can we set those short-term goals up, to start building and getting that momentum going in the best way for us. And I'm about to release an app as well that'll help us, because sometimes it's just the awareness, the lack of awareness that we have. And so by the time, I'm sure this is released, we'll have an app out there under the same name, or Primal 5, but it's giving people a daily score, giving them feedback on areas of strength and need for addressing. You can do it with a friend, kind of a buddy system technique and some AI insights. So just have a real passion for us getting, these simple but profoundly impactful aspects of our life in the right direction.
Terrific. And that's a lot of why people show up. They want to know the thought leaders and their insights, and they want to know the assets that person has to offer. And so both the workbook and the app, I'm sure, will be very compelling to a bunch of our audience. And where do they find you, Dr. Campbell?
So we have I have a website, our Primal 5, the number 5, or primal5.com. The workbook is available through Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's a link on our website for that. And then I have an Instagram page as well, our Primal 5.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us for the Seaworthy podcast. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. If you think we've earned it, please consider giving this podcast a like, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. Thanks.